So I've been keeping my eye on bean paste for a while now because I've been intrigued by the gorgeous flowers that people make with bean paste. But I've looked up recipes and they've always seemed, once I get to the part where you have to separate the beans from their shell, I'm done. I have to move on because my brain will not let me do that. I just cannot take the time to do that. I'm too impatient. So for a long time, I've been wanting to come up with an easier bean paste recipe. So I've been messing around a little bit and I have developed an easier bean paste recipe that does not require the removal of the skins. It will be a different bean paste from what others use, but it still creates gorgeous flowers. It is easier to make, but it is still time consuming because it still involves cooking at the stove for about 50 minutes. So keep that in mind. But it is still a bean paste recipe, still beautiful flowers, and still worth talking about, I think. Here's a rose that I made. I'm also going to show you how I made that with this bean paste recipe that I've put together. I've kind of melded a few different ideas to create this recipe, and it works. And you can create big, beautiful flowers with it if you're willing to spend the time cooking down the moisture from it, which is really what takes the longest time. But it is not tedious like removing the shells, and there's still shells in it again, so it will be a little bit different from regular bean paste, but like I said, I think worth it. Okay, so in this recipe, we've got canned beans with their water. We've got granulated sugar, we've got butter, we've got vanilla extract, and we've got heavy cream. A note on the beans. I like to use white beans, cannellini beans. You can use other kinds of white beans, but white then creates a better base as far as coloring goes. So that's why I stick with white. Here are some flowers I made using the bean paste just to show you ahead of time so you know what you're getting into. I've made some peonies on the right, I've made some roses on the left, and then just some other kind of cherry blossom type flowers. You can make beautiful flowers like with this stuff, and I'm going to show you how. Again, you just have to put the time in. I have some other recipes on my website that I love that are quicker than easier, and you can still make beautiful flowers with buttercream glaze, Shanty Flex, Brazilian cream, but this is another option I wanted to throw out there. Okay, Great Northern beans, white beans. I like to use a big can so I can make a big batch. This is 40.5 ounces or 1,140 grams or 1.14 kilograms. I use the whole can of beans and the water that they're in, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Okay, so I have 365 grams of granulated sugar as well. We're going to be mixing that in. I have 1 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. If you can use clear, that's probably better as far as coloring. It keeps a nice light base. And I have 62 grams of butter. I'm using unsalted butter here. You could use salted if you want. It's not really a big deal either way. Okay, so to start. Now, another note I want to make. I have a Vitamix. It's a very high-powered blender, basically. If you need a high-powered blender for this, I would say, because you really need to blend it really, really well in order to get all of the little pieces down to a very smooth consistency. Again, we're leaving the skins on and we're dumping the whole thing in there with its water. I've tried several different things with this. I've tried to leave out water because leaving all that water in causes you to have to cook this for about 50 minutes. I tried to get that time down. I tried to reduce that time by doing a number of things, and really the recipe did not come out the same. So I decided to stick with my original attempt here of leaving all the water in the can and dumping it all into the high-powered, high-speed blender. Okay, so I start off on low, and once it gets going, then I can turn it up. So if you're familiar with the Vitamix, like this thing can heat up soup for you because it's so high powered and you can leave it on for a bit and it will actually warm up food. That's how fast it is. But we're not going for that here, but we are going for a very, very well blended mixture. I've got it on about 3 here. turning it up to 4 a little bit, and I'm going to blend for a couple of minutes on that setting. I want it really, really smooth. I tried to take, like I said, I tried to take out, well, I tried to do this a different way where I just put the beans in, separated the water from it, and then I added about 10 ounces of the water back in so that it would blend. Because the problem is if you don't have enough moisture in there, enough water, it won't blend it well. That worked. I was able to do it, but it does get a little tricky. So you can try separating the water and adding as much back in as you need in order to blend this. See that consistency? Super, super smooth. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. So if you want to try to take water out and add just a little bit back in, you can attempt that. You're going to need at least 10 ounces to get it blended, and you're going to have to really work with your blender in order to get it blended smooth. So this is just the easiest way, but it does take a little bit longer, okay? So that we've got just the beans blended with their water, and we're putting it in a wide bottom pan on the stove, and I've got it at about number 3 on my biggest burner. And now you want to add in your granulated sugar and stir that in. So now we've got our bean mixture and our sugar. We do not want this to burn, right? We have to keep stirring, and we don't want it to burn. So that's the thing. It is still labor intensive. It's just not as labor intensive as removing the skins and running it through a sieve. I don't do any of that. Okay. So here, I've let it cook for 24 minutes, and I want to show you what it looks like after 24 minutes. You want to continuously stir. You can walk away for a minute here and there, but in general, we don't want a lot of this to stick to the bottom. Some of it will stick to the bottom, regardless of what you do. Unless you use a nonstick pan. I'm not into nonstick pans because I don't love Teflon. But if you are using a nonstick pan, then you could get this so none of it sticks to the bottom. Okay, here's 35 minutes. So that's what it looked like at 24 minutes. This is 35. At 35 minutes of stirring on medium-low heat, I think I eventually turned it up to number 4 on my burner. It's starting to really, that moisture is starting, the water starting to evaporate off now. Okay, so I'm still stirring continuously. You can see it bubbling up. I'm stirring the sides and the bottom. Eventually, we want to get this boiled down really, really well. So here's 40 minutes now. At 40 minutes, I'm really, really paying attention to this, not walking away from it. Okay, it's starting, the moisture is really starting to leave, but we are going to keep going with this until I can pick a huge clump of this up with my wooden spoon here, and it's not going to want to fall off of the wooden spoon. That's the idea. The more moisture you boil off of this, the better base you're going to have to work with, because you can always add more moisture to it, which we're going to be doing with heavy cream at the end. But if you've got too much moisture to begin with, then your petals won't hold their shape as well as we want them to. So we really do have to boil this down really well. Okay, so now we're getting closer to the 50-minute mark here. We're probably, at around the 45-minute mark. You can see I'm picking it up with my spatula, and it's still falling off a little bit. There's still a little too much moisture in it, still wanting to pull off the spatula, but I'm almost there. So you keep going, keep scraping, and now I've got it on my wooden spoon, and it's really pretty good. I have to shake it off to get it off. So that is about when we're going to call it quits. And for me, that was almost exactly 50 minutes. Now, that'll be more or less depending on what temperature you cook yours at. Mine was medium low, remember, but this is what we want it basically to look like when it's ready. You can pick it up on almost one big clump and put it into your bowl. You can make a double batch of this if you want, but it might be a little bit harder to cook. You might want to break it up into 2 separate pans, whatever you want to do. Okay, now we're adding the butter, and we're mixing that in just to kind of get it mixed a little bit. We are going to use our beaters on this. Adding the vanilla as well, just to give it a little extra flavor. This actually does taste pretty good, this stuff. I was surprised because I'm not a bean lover, but it was actually pretty good when I tried it. So, there's that too to go with this. So I think I had, okay, I added the vanilla in, and now I'm adding some white gel. You don't have to do this, but I want to lighten up my mixture a little bit. Even though I used white beans, it still comes out a bit brown. So add as much white gel in. It's just titanium dioxide. Is that what it's called? pretty sure. Um, and that will lighten it up for you so you have a lighter base to work with. Now get your beaters out and just mix it all so it's all homogeneous, right? Homogeneous? I always pronounce that wrong. And then it's ready. Once it's all mixed together and smooth, we can add our heavy cream. I add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of heavy cream, depending on how well you got it boiled down. You can start off with 1 tablespoon and see how that works for you, and you can always add in more if you want to adjust it. And then you could just mix it with by hand, or you can just get the beaters back in there to mix it all together to get it nice and smooth. And that is it. Okay, takes a while, but it's really easy. It just takes a while. It's labor intensive. 50 minutes is more than I generally like to spend making something. But if you take a whole day to make your bean paste because you really like it and you really want to work with it, well then you can just set the day aside and not worry about it. All right, so showing you how I made this flour, I use a 127 tip like I just showed you, and I just kind of roll some bean paste onto the center there. If you want to make a higher rose, then you can build up your center, which I will actually show you that in a minute as well. But if we're making a lower rose, not super high, I just kind of roll the center like so. But then I create a petal, one petal, and then I go in the middle of that to create my next petal, and then in that opening to create a third petal, and that is how I get that kind of closed tight center for my rose. And then I use my tip, my 127 tip, and you can see how this pipes beautifully. The end, I kind of let that roll back the edge of the petal there, and it creates this gorgeous, slightly rolled, smooth petal. It's just different from traditional buttercream. It creates beautiful detail. It's still a beautiful medium to work with, even with the skins on. So it is definitely, if you've been dying to try bean paste and you're willing to put the time in, it's definitely worth trying because you can create some beautifully detailed flowers with it. You don't have to worry about temperature with it. It's great. And then I just continue with my petals. There's a million different ways you can make roses. This will just create kind of an open rose for you. You can keep it small, keep it as more of a rose bud. I also have another tutorial using Shantyflex cream on the Cakeheads website for Cakeheads members, showing how to make a big, tall, round rose using Shantyflex cream, but you could do the same thing here using bean paste. I do really like this medium as well. I love the flowers that it creates. Look at the definition in there. It doesn't all meld together. A couple of things to note is this will eventually dry out on you. It will take a little while. The flowers do stay beautiful for several days, but if you do leave them out in the open air for longer than that, they will start drying out on you. You can put them in the fridge, that'd be fine, and they do fine in the fridge. I tried, like I said, I tried to get the cook time down, and in doing that, I changed the amount of sugar. I put less sugar in because when you add more sugar, you have to cook down that sugar, that adds to the cook time. But when I added less sugar, the petals got very brittle very quickly, so that was not a good option. You can see now creating this rose, I'm kind of starting low and creating an arc and going up a little bit higher and then bringing it down low again, the petal. And that's how I'm kind of creating these outer open petals. So you can see how lovely it comes out with this bean paste. I really was really happy with it. And then I just keep going just to kind of show you. You can just keep going and going. And your petals, you can touch them. If you're making this for a customer, obviously you want to wear gloves, but you can kind of manipulate them a little bit with your fingers to roll the petals back or to, flatten them out to make them less rolled. It really is a very, very cool medium. some other tips about bean paste. I think I think he told you everything that I wanted to tell you about it. Again, I have another recipe, a buttercream recipe that creates gorgeous detailed flowers as well. That's way easier to make on the Cake Heads website for members. And then I have another recipe that's great in the summer, the Brazilian cream Shantyflex recipe for Cake Heads members. I talk all about using those, making those on the Cake Heads website if you want to check those out. But this, like I said, I do really like this medium as well. Okay, I'm using True Color brand food coloring here because it's all natural, plant-based. I love that. It's, it gets rid of the toxins that are generally found in regular food colors. They've done a lot of studies on food coloring, and I don't love what I read in these studies. So I do love this alternative for those who want to stay away from regular food coloring. True Color is a great company, a great brand. It is different from regular food coloring. You're going to have to, so it comes in powder form, and you just add a tiny bit of water to the powder to get it to gel like consistency. So here I've mixed some pink and some white, and I'm adding just drops of water to get it to the color that I want it to be. And then I'll add that to my bean paste. You can add it directly to your bean paste, or you can airbrush your bean paste. In this case, I'm using it, I'm going to create an airbrush color with it. The more water you add to it, you can make it an airbrush consistency and then airbrush that on, which is what I did here. And I really only did that because I was just playing around with these. These weren't going on a cake, so I just wanted to try out different ways. But you can just add your regular food coloring to the bean paste and make it whatever color you want. So that was the bean paste. This was the buttercream glaze that I was talking about, which is another great recipe. It's on cakeheads.com for members. This is probably my favorite to pipe with, and I created these peonies and roses for this, and this blue boots cake, which is also, there's a full tutorial available for that cake on the Cake Heads website. And these are the Shantyflex flowers, the Brazilian cream that is great in hot weather. I talk all about that, show the recipe, and create these flowers, a ranunculus flower and a round rose with that on the Cake Heads website as well, if you feel like you want to come over and check that out. And also how to create a floral wreath cake with some filler flowers and such, that's on Cake Heads as well. If you ever decide you want to become a Cake Heads member, we'd love to have you. We have a great group over there, a community group where we share and we learn and we have a ton of fun together. So come join the Cake Heads family. If you ever feel like you want to take your cake decorating up a notch, we would love to have you. Thanks for watching.